Language is a system that connects sound and meaning. Sounds are grouped into words, which in turn are grouped into sentences, and sentences express meanings. We're going to start by looking at the structure of words, which is called morphology. If you're wondering where the term morphology came from, it consists of two parts: morph, which means form, and ology, which means the study of. So literally, morphology means the study of forms, or more specifically, the study of the forms of words. This video introduces the concept of categories, which is fundamental to both morphology and syntax. We'll start by seeing that words belong to categories, such as nouns and verbs. Then we'll look at how exactly these categories are defined, and we'll also see that the categories fall into two distinct groups. The main outcome that you should get from this video is the ability to classify a word as either a noun, a verb, or an adjective. One of the most basic facts about language is that words belong to categories. By categories, we mean what's traditionally known as parts of speech, things like nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Categories such as this are the building blocks of grammar. Grammar, by the way, is just a cover term for the structure of words and sentences. In other words, grammar is a cover term that groups together morphology and syntax. What does it mean to say that categories are the building blocks of grammar? Consider these three simple sentences. Dogs bark, babies cry, students study. How exactly are these sentences put together? What's the pattern? Something that should be clear is that we don't memorize the possibilities for sentence structure on a word-by-word basis. For example, we don't memorize all the places where we can use the word dogs in a sentence, and then separately memorize all the places we can use the word babies in a sentence. What we actually do is something that's a bit more interesting. We memorize a more abstract recipe for building a sentence, regardless of the exact words that we're using. It's a fact that if you're trying to create a two-word sentence, there's one set of words that can begin the sentence, such as dogs, babies, and students. Let's call this set of words set 1. And there's another set of words that can end the sentence, such as bark, cry, and study. Let's call this set of words set 2. The rule for creating a sentence makes reference to these two sets. A sentence consists of a word from set 1, followed by a word from set 2. Now, the labels set 1 and set 2 are not very memorable, and these are not the labels that linguists actually use. Instead, we have special terms that refer to each set. The words in set 1 are called nouns, and the words in set 2 are called verbs. So the rule is actually that a sentence consists of a noun followed by a verb. This was a very simple illustration, but it's enough to make the point that categories are essential to grammar. Your linguistic competence consists of subconscious knowledge of the structure of your language, and the rules that make up this subconscious knowledge are expressed in terms of categories, not in terms of individual words. Rules such as a sentence consists of a noun plus a verb. Categories like noun and verb are what your mental grammar works with. The preceding example involved the structure of a sentence, which is syntax, but categories are just as important in morphology. Let's consider three sets of words: kind, sure, and happy, do, invite, and attach, and cat, pencil, and toy. Let's think about what we can add to the structure of these words. First, is it possible to add the prefix un? For the first set of words, the answer is yes. We can say unkind, unsure, and unhappy. For the second set of words, the answer is also yes. We can say undo, uninvite, and unattach. For the third set of words, however, the answer is no. We can't really talk about an uncat, an unpencil, or an untoy. You can imagine what these words might mean, but they just don't sound natural. Let's try the same thing with another prefix. Is it possible to add the prefix re? For the first set of words, the answer is no. We can't really say re-kind, re-sure, and re-happy. They're just not natural English words. For the second set of words, the answer is yes. We can say redo, re-invite, and reattach. For the third set of words, the answer is no. We can't really talk about a re-cat, a re-pencil, or a re-toy. If you consider the entire table, what we've seen is that each of the three sets of words has different morphological properties, that is, different properties of word structure. The first set of words can take the prefix un, but not the prefix re. The second set of words can take both prefixes, and the third set of words can't take either prefix. If we want to describe the grammar of English, we need to recognize that these three sets are distinct. Each set of words belongs to a different category. To distinguish the categories, we could use arbitrary labels like set 1 and set 2, but it's more convenient to use well-established terms. The words that take un but not re belong to the category called adjectives. The words that take both prefixes belong to the category called verbs, and the words that don't take either prefix belong to the category called nouns. The overall lesson here is that the rules of word structure, such as whether or not you can add a particular prefix, are expressed in terms of categories, just as the rules of sentence structure are. In summary, what we've seen is that words belong to categories. A category is a set of words that share grammatical properties. The grammatical properties can involve either syntax, where can the words appear in a sentence, or they can involve morphology. What prefixes and suffixes can the words take? Ultimately, then, category labels like noun, verb, and adjective are just convenient shorthands for sets of words that share particular grammatical properties. And these categories are fundamental to the grammar of a language. The rules of both syntax and morphology are expressed in terms of categories. Since categories are so important, we need to know how to define them and how to recognize them. Traditionally, categories are defined by meaning. The traditional definition of a noun is a word that denotes a person, place, or thing. So a noun is defined based on what it refers to. There are problems with the traditional approach, however, and linguists prefer to define categories in terms of grammar. For example, based on the properties that we looked at above, a noun is a word that can begin a two-word sentence, like dogs bark, and can't take the prefixes un and re, along with many other properties. In practice, you can use both meaning and grammar to help you figure out the category of a word. For now, we'll just focus on nouns, verbs, and adjectives. First, nouns. We'll use the abbreviation N to refer to nouns throughout this course. Some examples of nouns are citizen, tree, sand, and intelligence. As far as meaning is concerned, nouns denote entities, such as people and things. But this meaning-based definition isn't particularly helpful for nouns like intelligence. Is intelligence a person, place, or thing? Well, maybe it's a thing, but that depends on what exactly a thing is, and that's a discussion that could get very philosophical. It's safer to use a grammatical test to diagnose the category. A really easy kind of grammatical test is something called a frame sentence. This is a sentence that has a gap in a position that can only be filled by a particular category. The frame sentence, "the blank seems good," can be used to diagnose a word as a noun. If the word can fit in that blank, then it must be a noun. The citizen seems good, the tree seems good, the sand seems good, the intelligence seems good. They all fit, so they're all nouns. Next, verbs. We'll use the abbreviation V for verbs. Some examples of verbs are go, teach, melt, give, assassinate. In terms of meaning, verbs denote events, such as actions or states. But this is another definition that isn't always the most helpful. For example, what exactly counts as a state? Again, it's safer to use a grammatical test, such as the following frame sentence: I will blank, or I will blank it, or I will blank him or her. If a word can fit into that blank, then the word must be a verb. I will go, I will teach, I will melt, I will give it, I will assassinate him. Finally, adjectives. We'll use the abbreviation ADJ for adjectives. Some examples of adjectives are nice, red, tall, happy, kind, and sure. In terms of meaning, adjectives denote properties. In terms of grammar, most adjectives fit into the following frame: the very blank one, the very nice one, the very red one, the very tall one, and so on. When you're figuring out the category of a word, there's something that you need to be very careful about. Many words have more than one category. Take the word walk, for example. We can say I will walk, which diagnoses walk as a verb, but we can also say the walk seems good, which diagnoses walk as a noun. Walk happens to be a word that exists in two versions. There's a verb version and a noun version. It's the same for the word fence. We can say the fence seems good, which diagnoses fence as a noun, but we can also say I will fence, referring to the sport of fencing, which diagnoses the word fence as a verb. The lesson here is that you can't identify the category of a word out of the blue. In order to identify a word's category, you need to see how the word is being used in a sentence. This is an important point. One last point about categories is that they actually come in two types. The categories we've looked at so far are nouns, verbs, and adjectives. There's a further category of adverbs, which are closely related to adjectives. For example, alongside the adjectives sad, cold, and intelligent, we have the adverbs sadly, coldly, and intelligently. But there are also a bunch of additional categories beyond these basic ones. There's a category called determiners, which includes words like the, this, and that. There's a category called conjunctions, which includes words like and, or, but, and if. And there's a category called auxiliaries, which includes words like shall, is, and has. There's something different about these additional categories in comparison with the basic categories like nouns, verbs, and adjectives. Nouns, verbs, and adjectives have fairly rich descriptive meanings. Take a noun like dog. You can easily draw a picture of what this noun denotes. Or take a verb like dance. You can easily act out what this verb denotes. But what about words like the, if, and shall? Can you draw a picture of the meaning of the? Can you act out the meaning of if? Not in any straightforward way. The meaning of these words is extremely abstract. It's very hard to describe, unlike the meaning of nouns, verbs, and adjectives. What we're seeing here is a fundamental distinction between two groups of categories. One group of categories, called content words, includes nouns, verbs, and adjectives. The other group, called function words, includes determiners, conjunctions, and auxiliaries. Content words and function words differ in fundamental ways. As we've seen, content words have rich descriptive meaning, whereas function words have what can be called grammatical meaning, a meaning that involves grammatical properties like definite article for the word the, or future tense for the word shall. A second difference is that content words are what are called open classes. An open class is a category that you can easily add new words to. It's very easy, for example, to create a new noun. English adds new nouns all the time. An example of a noun that was created relatively recently is the word selfie. Function words, on the other hand, are closed classes. You can't easily create a new function word. You're welcome to try to coin a new determiner or a new conjunction, but it's very unlikely that it would ever catch on. The membership of these classes is fixed. The third difference, at least in English, is that content words can have morphology added to them, but function words can't. You can take the verb go and add the suffix ing to make the word going, or the noun selfie and add the suffix s to make selfies, or the adjective true plus the prefix un to make the word untrue. You can't do the same thing with function words. It's not possible to create words like the-ing or ifable or unand. Even if we can imagine what they might mean, they're just not possible English words. By the way, there's an important linguistic notation that I've used here, which you're going to see throughout this course. When a linguist writes an asterisk immediately in front of a word or sentence, this indicates that the word or sentence is ungrammatical. By ungrammatical, we mean that the word or sentence doesn't obey the rules of the language. It's something that a native speaker will reject as being something they can't say. You'll see this notation a lot, because if we're trying to understand the linguistic competence that a speaker has in their head, it's useful for us to know not just what the speaker can produce, but also what they cannot produce. Going back to the distinction between content words and function words, the difference between the two kinds of categories is especially clear if we look at how they're used in sentences. Consider this sentence. A customer has asked the server if the soup and salad are good. How would the sentence sound if we left out all the function words and just pronounced the content words? It would be, customer asked server, soup salad good. Now, that's not grammatical English, so it gets marked with an asterisk, but you can still kind of understand what's being said. What if we instead left out all the content words and just pronounced the function words? In that case, it would be, has the if the and are. That's also clearly not grammatical English, but in this case, it's also entirely incomprehensible. This little exercise clearly illustrates the difference between content words and function words. Content words express the core meaning of the sentence. Without the content words, a sentence doesn't say anything. Function words don't express the core meaning, but if you leave them out, the sentence just sounds wrong. You can think of function words as the grammatical glue that holds a sentence together. The two kinds of categories do very different jobs, but they're both essential in the creation of grammatical sentences. This video has introduced the concept of categories. You've seen that categories are the building blocks of grammar in both syntax and morphology. You've seen that the most reliable way to identify the category of a word is to use a grammatical frame sentence. You should now be able to use these sentences to classify words as nouns, verbs, and adjectives. And you've seen that categories fall into two groups, content words and function words, which have very different properties.